Hello and welcome to Dyslexia Explored. I'm Darius Nomderon, your host, with my other host,
Hi, I'm Joe.
Jolie. We have today a man who began his days in the marketing world as at university, started working in IT many, many years ago, 26 years ago, and helped schools get their computers and so forth. Ended up in a factory, running the factory, and came back to work with a friend called Anthony in the AT world. And for the last 18 years, he's been working in the disability students allowance world, the assistive technology world, knows it inside and out. And 8 years ago, actually started his own company with Anthony Aventino with a goal to find the new emerging tech within the DSA world and the workplace and introduce it to DSA and the workplace so students could get the best tech that was around. And so I'd really like to introduce you to Matt Dean from Aventino. Matt, it's great to have you here.
Brilliant. Cheers, Darius. It's lovely to be here, and Joe as well. Good to see you both again.
Yeah, likewise.
And you're in Spain. You live in Spain now, but you're an Englishman who was brought up in Wales and now lives in Spain and has also raced for the rally championships in Scotland. So, you've got a little bit of different nationalities, allegiances there.
I was going to say, yeah, slightly, potentially maybe a little bit nomadic, but yes, so very, very lucky to live in Spain now. I have been for a few years. We decided to move here once our daughters had grown up and left home, and we thought we'd try something a little bit different. Definitely a little bit warmer, very much drier than my sort of earlier years, shall we say, in Wales. It was certainly a little bit on the wet side, but yeah, very, very lucky to be doing this now.
Well, we've got you here because you've got this wealth of knowledge in the realm of what kind of tools help people with dyslexia, ADHD, all sorts of different assistive technologies that are out there. And we're really going to deep dive into that world and sort of mine your mind of all this knowledge that you've got in this podcast for our guests. Now, this is going to be relevant for anyone, anywhere in the world. I know there's people, you can be listening from Australia. We've got listeners in America. We've got listeners in Singapore, all around the world. So these tools are available in one form or another everywhere in the world. The slight difference will keep referring to the Disability Students Allowance, and that's just one grant that's in the UK where the government will actually pay for this software for you, but it's also available elsewhere if you want to pay for it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, we'll see how far my wealth of knowledge goes, but hopefully it'll be enough to give all the listeners a little bit more of an idea of what is out there, what's available. And I think ultimately we're looking at this in terms of where that technology offers a real benefit to individuals and stuff, whether that be, like I say, in education, whether that's the workplace, even at home and stuff. We're seeing more of that technology now being used within the sort of the home environment as well.
And also apprentices, aren't you? You're heavily involved with apprenticeships in the UK too.
Yeah, so we've got another company we're involved with called SkillBridge, who offer apprenticeship support and stuff to increasing number of students actually who are now going down the route of apprenticeship degrees and stuff within institutions. I think there's quite a shift towards that, and where there is available the assistive technology and support that they need in terms of what they're doing. And I think a lot of that technology now that it's moved on, we see in terms of those products that are available either as an app or online in web format are therefore lending themselves to a different environment. So if you're an apprentice, for example, you might be at university, you might be on your laptop, but then you might be in another environment where you can just log onto a machine, even into a workplace where that technology is then available to you in different scenarios and stuff as well.
And I know certainly when we're chatting with people who've got dyslexia, often they are attracted to more sort of vocational roles that the apprenticeships would be the sort of training route into. And actually their strengths really lend themselves to that. Their sort of innovative, creative, problem-solving capacity. And then there is sometimes still the written administrative sort of side of things that probably aren't as attractive. And so that's really where the technology can offer a massive amount of support, isn't it?
Yeah, 100% and stuff. And I think we're going to probably see, personally, I think we'll see more individuals going down that route and stuff, of finding their vocation and stuff. And like you say, you know, where I think historically, maybe within education, it's sort of that path that everybody has taken. And again, for those that maybe with dyslexia and things like that, who found that a lot more difficult, that these routes now open themselves up and stuff to them to go down that and to utilize some of the technology. And again, if you're doing an apprenticeship, there is that funding and stuff available there for you to take advantage of it as well.
Okay. Well, where should we start? Where should we start the story today about assistive technology, Joe? What do you think?
Well, I mean, interestingly, we were speaking with parents this week. We did a workshop in our local library, and your analogy, Darius, of someone walking up a hill really sort of resonated with people. So I think that's probably a good place to start, as to why finding the right assistive technology is really helpful.
Well, why don't I kick off with that story
Yeah.
then? Yeah. Okay, so for many, many years, I've been trying to find a simple way to explain what dyslexia feels like and what technological solutions feel like with dyslexia when you start using them. And it's kind of like this. It's like walking up a mountain. Imagine you're about to go up a mountain and you all put on your shoes, your walking shoes, and you start climbing up the mountain. And then all of a sudden, you're starting to feeling like, oh, you're finding it a bit hard to climb up the mountain, and people are starting to move ahead of you and so on. And you realize that you're starting to get a bit of a blister on your foot. And we all know what that feels like. It's just a tiny little blister. It might be a tiny little thing on the shoe that's rubbing against it. And kind of push through it. You keep pushing through it. You keep pushing through it. You keep trying harder. And that blister ends up, the top rips off it and it's starting to bleed. And you keep walking and you keep walking. And then you feel completely crippled by it. And you end up stopping by the side of the path and going, I think there must be something wrong with my legs, or I might not be trying hard enough, or there's something wrong with me. And someone comes along, sits down beside you and says, look, why don't you take off the shoes? And they go, look, you've got blisters. And you may not even have realized, you just know there's something wrong. Take off the shoes, you see the blisters, and they go, look, we just need to patch up those blisters a little bit. And actually, you're wearing the wrong size of shoe. They're 1 or 2 sizes too small for your feet, and they're really rubbing. You need to get the right shoes. And so what that person does is they go and get you a pair of shoes. And can you imagine how valuable a new pair of shoes on the mountainside would be when you're in that kind of scenario? Everyone's racing ahead of you. Your feet are bleeding. You feel so tired and exhausted and in agony. And you put on those shoes with some nice plasters and you start walking. It's still a bit sore with the plasters. And gradually you realize, oh, it's not getting worse. Oh, I can do this. This is okay. And then those blisters start healing up, and then you can actually walk. And sometimes you can even walk faster than all the others. And you realize there's nothing wrong with your legs. There's nothing wrong with your feet. Your feet are just a different size. And it's also the same for our brains. Our brains are different shapes. And the shoes for our brains are often the tools we use, whether it's Microsoft Word or a task management tool or a presentation tool or whatever. These are all tools that are shaped around our minds. And often with dyslexia, our minds are a slightly different shape. I mean, not hugely different, just slightly different. But when you're using these tools, they can be really rubbing up against you and creating these blisters of the mind, as it were. Until you start thinking, is there something wrong with me? Am I stupid? Why can I not do this, etc.? Until you find the tools that actually make the difference. So that's really what we're talking about here. What kind of, in a way, I imagine the DSA, the Disability Students Allowance, or parents getting their children ready for school or equipped for life, is like going into a camping shop and the guy saying, right, you need a backpack. Okay, let's get the right backpack for your body shape. Let's get the right shoes for you. Let's get the right coat. Let's get the right socks, hat, everything else, so that you can actually make this journey up the mountain of a university degree or a course. And that's basically what we're talking about here, getting properly equipped.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm thinking, I mean, DSA is obviously absolutely fantastic and levels the playing field so that students who do need additional support for whatever reason. I mean, obviously our focus is dyslexia, but there's support for physical disabilities as well as other disabilities. But from a parent point of view or from a student point of view, there's a lot that you can do proactively to research what the best fit is going to be, but it's just where
Yes.
do people start?
Yes.
And I guess that's where I'm thinking, Matt, you've got a lot of that experience working with schools, working with AT Superstore. What would you recommend? We'll have so many listeners who are thinking, I'd love to wear the right shoes, but I don't know where to go to get them. I don't know how to
Yeah.
get sized up. So where do they start?
Why don't we start with a few characters? Because there's so many different things. Let's imagine, and we'll bring some characters to the shop, as it were. And you're like the assistant at the shop with that experience. You're like, oh yeah, I think I needed this kind of shoe or that kind of shoe or this. So let's just take a straightforward example right now of a student going to university with dyslexia. What would you say are the normal tools, range of tools for dyslexia that are offered to them as in the shop, as it were, or they're fitted for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm still recovering from going up that mountain there with you, Darius. I was with you all the way to the summit there for a minute. So I think the thing to stress here is that there's a couple of things. So in terms of, and obviously like I say today, we're talking about the DSA, which again is a great thing on offer for students when they get to university. But these are the ones that we're talking about who have got to university to then be able to benefit from that system. And I'll come on to this a little bit after, because this sort of links in with something that you mentioned there, Joe, with something called AT Superstore. We've recently just done the TES show in London, which was a bit of an eye-opener for me, and it is every year that we've done it, in terms of the conversations with those in primary and secondary school education and stuff, who are talking about the problems, what are the solutions, how do I find them. When it comes to things like the DSA, it's obviously then down to those assessors who are far more qualified than me in this to then, with the student, identify the need that the student has but primarily what we see from our side of that is products, whether they be text to speech products. So there's a whole range of text to speech products out there. We see something like Text Aid being quite a popular one because of, again, it being online. We're seeing products, so speech to text, where there's products Dragon, TalkType. There's a new product called Scribe, which is out as well. So again, things like that. Mind mapping tools, again, time management, things that are, I guess, to a certain extent, when you look at those are products designed as well for individuals to be on that, to get those going through DSA, to be on that level playing field. So to be able to have the technology there to support them in areas and stuff where they may be struggling. But primarily we would see products around those sort of areas and things like that. So that gives them a good basis then in terms of any of that written work. Also, now we're seeing more in terms of revision tools as well, where students are struggling from a revision point of view, whether, again, those are also very popular and stuff in terms of being there as a benefit to the student as well.
Okay.
Oh, well, I was going to say, you mentioned though the primary and secondary ages, but in a sense, DSA is brilliant, but it's like you said, Matt, you've got to get to university to be able to make the most of it. And so for students with dyslexia, the world is changing massively. I mean, I think our kids are of a similar age, but they're still much more tech native than we ever were. And then I look at my 10-year-old nephew and he's completely tech native. So actually that sort of tech support, even at a younger age, is probably quite instrumental to ensure that, and university is not the answer for everyone, but if a child wants university to be their next step, they've been equipped and enabled to get there.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so that's quite interesting, because if we think about this shop that I described at the bottom of the mountain, in a way, you've got AT Superstore. Is that what it's called? AT
It
Superstore?
is, yeah. And it
So it's
was
like going into a big superstore of different assistive technologies. It's very similar to the analogy, isn't it?
100%. I mean, I think we're up to over 200 products in there now. And those are products from companies all over the world. But one of the things, like I say, we find is that within that primary, secondary school education piece is teachers. And this was something we learned. So last year we did TES, we learned that resources, what schools were looking for was resources and peer information. What's John done down the road at St Mary's School that I could possibly implement? This year, every teacher I think we spoke to talked about independence, about creating an environment for those pupils of independence, because when they go to university or they go into the workplace, they're not going to have that teacher with them. They're not going to have that parent with them. So if we can adopt the technology that we're talking about, especially for dyslexic users within primary and secondary school, then actually that independent piece becomes very much adopted at an earlier stage. And some of the things that we were learning around there was, okay, so as a school, as a parent, where do you go to find those products? Where do you go to learn about what somebody else has done? And I spoke to schools and stuff, and they say, okay, well, I'll go onto Google and I'll type in, we just mentioned now, maybe speech to text. That's what I've typed in. I said, that's great. That's a good start. But what does that give you in terms of those results in Google? It'll be based on somebody's paid advertisements. It'll be paid on somebody's good SEO work. It's not necessarily going to find you within education the product that is right for that individual. And that's what we wanted to do with the Superstore, is to, and you can go on there and search by age group, by disability, and it will give you the products that are relevant to you for you to go have a look at. And Carly is currently, leads our marketing, is currently building a resources section within the site so that we can post all this information and that schools and parents can go on and read about what other people have done with that technology and see really where potentially for their child and stuff there is a benefit.
And we'll definitely put the link to AT Superstore in the show notes, because I think you're also being really humble about some of the services you offer there, Matt, because I'm on your mailing list. And actually the webinars and the support that you give people, it's not just that people have to go and search. There's an incredible amount of support for parents to demystify the AT world. And I should just clarify, when we're saying AT, we're meaning assistive technology. We're just presuming that's a given, but that's not always the case. So we're talking about technology, software that can really help and assist. Essentially, exactly what the name suggests. But
yeah, and I think
that's
that
fascinating.
you said, Joe, as well, is that word technology is sometimes what we find. It's not so much it's a barrier, but it is a point where people go, okay, does that mean it's difficult, or does that mean it's expensive? That side of it is something we're trying to say. Look, my niece is now at university, but going back several years and stuff, she could show me on my phone things I didn't even know it could do. And I think that's the environment that we're in now, is we're in this environment of the younger generation, they very tech savvy, knowing how they want their technology to work, but then saying, okay, but I need that little bit of extra support to do X, Y, and Z.
That's really fascinating about the AT Superstore. I hadn't actually really thought much about it before this podcast, to be honest, Matt, but I kind of get it now. So it's kind of like at DSA, as a student, you walk into a needs assessment, and you've got an expert there, an expert fitter who knows kind of what you need, talks you through it and says, oh, well, okay, right, if that's an issue, we'll do this, we'll do that, and so on. But when you're at school and prior to that, you don't have that expert sitting there telling you, here are options to consider, etc. You're kind of very much on your own. So is this Superstore a bit like a middle ground where you've kind of got all the products close to you in one market, as it were, with information about each, and you can walk around and sort of decide for yourself, like DIY it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think it's the point of 86 was to give people the option to make an educated decision on a product. When they're on the product page, they can look at videos, they can look at information, they can look at the resources to go, actually, that's exactly what I need because I have a pupil. And I think that the thing that we find within education, and I'm lucky in the fact that having grown up with my mother who was a primary school head teacher, that I've seen a lot of this stuff within education where there's a lot of great stuff that goes on. A lot of that in secondary and primary school is more not so much the awareness of the product, but then obviously the budget constraints that those schools are under to then find something that fits that bill. And I think the one thing I would say from my sort of experiences in it, from what we've seen on AT Superstore, is that there is a lot of cost-effective solutions. It is not, we're not talking about huge amounts of money for pieces of software and hardware that can fundamentally make a difference. And I think that's the bit that we're also trying to get across, is that this is not a barrier to people around that price, that there are. And I think that's testament, if I'm being honest, to working with great people that create great software, is that they want it to make a difference. And that the price point of those pieces of software and stuff is actually directly related to them wanting to make a difference.
So it can be surprisingly affordable. You can go in there and it can be surprisingly affordable. So it's kind of like in this Superstore, you've got teachers wandering around this Superstore. I'm just imagining a virtual Superstore in my mind. And you've also got parents who are wondering, maybe my child might want this as well. So it's really directed towards teachers primarily, and then secondary parents. Is that the idea?
It's proved quite interesting. It was a concept that Anthony came up with, and as it's sort of evolved and stuff, what we've tended to find is that not only in education but also the workplace, we have an incredible amount of workplace customers going through there. So, and that really does range, believe it or not, from NHS all the way through to, we've got some housing associations and things, all the way through to parents at home that are going on and buying simple products that we do, something called D-Buds, which are basically in-ear noise cancelling earbuds, really designed for people with autism, ADHD, which are £35 all the way up to very expensive keyboards designed for people with physical disability. So it's a real range of people who are going on there and stuff. But I think one of the main objectives for us was to have as many different products from as many different people all over the world, where one of those products would make a difference to somebody.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sure it was you, Matt, that said it earlier, this sort of technology can help in the home environment as well, because you don't just have dyslexia in your studies and or any other accommodation that you need. You need it in the home environment as well. Now, our kids are grown. They're not quite flown, but they're grown. But when they were little, we were sort of a whiteboard in the kitchen, and you would write up everything that you needed to think about for the week, and then we would map it out so it was visual so that they could understand it. Now, that was pre the advent of more technological solutions, but it really is that there's stuff, a parent could go on to the Superstore and be like, this is a particular pain point, and there would be some solutions for that, whether that's how do we communicate, like you say, the earbuds, how do we stop the overwhelm, how do we organize time management. So I think the encouragement is that there are an awful lot of solutions out there, and there are an awful lot of people thinking about these solutions. And it's sometimes when you're in the trenches, certainly when we were speaking to the parents this week, they're right in the weeds of, okay, my school is looking very different for my child than I was expecting, or we've reached that age and stage where actually they need a little bit more support. And my parents were both teachers before they retired, so I'm a massive fan of the education system. And I do believe teachers are absolutely doing the best they can, but they can't produce a tailored solution for every child. And so that's where parents advocating and researching and finding solutions is kind of essential, really, in a lot of situations.
Absolutely. And I mean, we talked about this, and Darius, you mentioned it, you know, things like text to speech as a prime example and stuff, which we see widely used by dyslexic users, is we also see that in terms of whether it's a workplace or whether it's at home or a school, where potentially there are people who are undiagnosed dyslexic for whatever reason that might be, and some of that technology we know from the school environment where children can use it at home, but sometimes it's not the child that's using it. Sometimes it's the parent that's using it, and things like, you know, sending home a newsletter or anything else like that and stuff, that actually being able to have that potentially as a parent or an undiagnosed parent being able to use that software to read that back, that's a whole different ball game then in terms of being able to change that, to see how easy it is to use it. Same in the workplace, where we know there are very well-known sort of companies and stuff that use assistive technology across their networks because they know there will be staff within there with undisclosed disabilities, and dyslexia being a prime example of that.
And something that I realized is one way to really help your child is to start using these assistive technologies yourself as a parent proactively. Now, taking dyslexia, because we're the Dyslexia Explored podcast here as our example, often when you get the diagnosis your child has got dyslexia, the person doing the assessment goes, right, okay, this is inherited. It's often one of the parents have got dyslexia, not automatically, but often. Which one do you think might have dyslexia? And then often one of them goes, well, actually, this is sounding very, very familiar. And they often get an assessment done as well. And it's life-changing for them because they have an answer to why they have found certain things difficult going up that mountain. And when they start using some of these tools, whether it's speech to text, text to speech, mind mapping, I know it from mind mapping myself, is that often a student, I can teach the child with dyslexia to mind map their way through school, but often they forget to do it because they don't have the automaticity. And because they're not seeing it as a visual cue in front of them, they lose the habit of it. And then somebody comes along, why didn't you mind map that essay? The parent says, and they go, oh gosh, yes, I should have. That would have been so much easier to do the outline. But if the parent is constantly mind mapping on the whiteboard some notes, or they're mind mapping their notes or whatever, then the parent is starting to model it for the child, and often knows how to use the tech or has the tech for the child to use at work. They bring it in from work and they go, oh, why don't you do it on mine? And so on. And then the child gets used to it and takes up an app of their own. What are your thoughts on that kind of scenario of parents doing it for their children?
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that this starts making me think actually in terms of myself here in this conversation, because I'm very much a visual person around stuff, and I find it a lot easier to, some of the team in, or will it sort of acknowledge this, is that I will draw things and then hold them up to the screen going, is that what you mean? Because this is how I'm visually thinking this should lay out. Because that's far easier for me to do that than to try and convey anything verbally. Sorry, but in written format. And that's something, again, that I think it is quite interesting when you see parents and stuff suddenly using that. And we've done a few sessions where we've done webinars and stuff for parents to see the technology. And you can see people, and you can see by the questions that they're asking, going, oh, so can it Oh, okay, I can do that. Oh, interesting. And they start to go through that process, I think, of going, actually, maybe I've got dyslexia. Maybe this is something that is, and starting to then understand that process and stuff, and the fact that we are we are all very different in the way that we also learn and the way that we interact with stuff, things like that. And I think it's quite an interesting piece when you see parents and children together in those environments where the parent can see, actually, yeah, perhaps I need to get an assessment myself here as well, because they can see the benefit of it. And this is, I suppose we also see a lot of stuff historically and things. I know people out there where dyslexia, was sort of, you weren't dyslexic, you were just stupid, and we see that, and you weren't this and you weren't that and everything else and stuff. And I think that's something that is, as we all get older, the mindset changes and everything else and stuff like that. I think we're talking about something now which is recognized and people embrace and stuff, and see where there is the technology, there is the support, but there's also a benefit for people in terms of the fact that actually I might be dyslexic, but I'm actually very good at doing this, or I do things in a slightly different way. So yeah, but we certainly see it with parents and stuff now.
And I think it's worth mentioning as well, just for complete clarity, people wouldn't actually need a formal assessment to be able to buy the software.
No.
And interestingly, although DSA requires a formal assessment, Access to Work, which is a grant for people in the workplace to get workplace strategy coaching and software, actually doesn't require a formal assessment at all. And it's that being, I guess, just being open to technology support. As I'm thinking like, without missing a beat, I use online support to do the weekly shopping, because otherwise everyone would go hungry. The thought of going to a physical shop and doing a food shop in the middle of a full working week is a complete nightmare. But actually, I can do an online shop while I'm listening to something or watching something. So we use technology in a massive array of circumstances already. And so it's kind of encouraging people that actually, why struggle with something that's creating really high friction, that's kind of giving you the metaphorical blister in life, when there's probably a really good solution out there for it. And it warrants a bit of unbiased research. Like you say, use a reputable service like AT Superstore. You're not vested in what people provide. You just genuinely want the best fit for people. So it is that sense of technology as our friend, not our foe.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing about the technology being our friend and not our foe is that sometimes it is our foe. Okay. So I'll take the counter argument on this a little bit, in that, for example, you could have a very good word processing software, very good linear note-taking software, I don't know, Evernote or whatever, but then it's too long, didn't read for a lot of people. And with dyslexia, it's words didn't read too long. Even like a heading or a small paragraph, I didn't even read it. I just scanned the first few words and then the last two, and trying to got a general gist of it. And maybe I was slightly off, or maybe I guessed it right, but that's often the case. Too long didn't read. So the beautiful thing about this assistive technology is that it's bringing in tech, but a slightly different emphasis on tech, and that isn't in there in the mainstream. Like, often there is speech to text on your phone and on your computer, but then you start using it and you go, that's really great, but actually I need it to be able to read out a whole book. And then you use a different tool that reads out the whole book. And I think it would be really interesting to just kind of drill down into just a few of these key concepts with dyslexia, for example. And I think we take it for granted, but why does speech to text help so much? Why does text to speech help so much? And why does mind mapping help so much? So those are the three main things that often are the staple baseline of, you got dyslexia, you got to try these three main things and see which one really helps you. They may not, but why? Like, I was intrigued by when you said parents seeing some of these things in action. What switches them on? Let's take speech to text, for example. Why is that really helpful?
So it's interesting, and I think there's a point around this which if we go back to the technology part, take out the assisted part for a minute, and we just go from a technology side. I remember years back, another education show where I was speaking to a teacher who wanted to know, was there anything that you could talk into and it would write on the screen or action things on your computer? And the exact quote was, because her husband's car had a button that if you hold it, you can then tell it to dial somebody. So I said, okay. I said, so what you're talking about here is basically speech and voice recognition software. Yeah, that's been around in terms of things like Dragon for years, and we're on version 16 now. WhatsApp is another good example. You've got a choice. Do you want to type your WhatsApp, or do you want to hold the microphone down and leave somebody a voice note? Now,
the world's divided into what they think about voice notes.
well, this is it. This is it. Now, for me, I will prefer a voice note because I can do it quickly, I can do it easily, and it'll be exactly what I want to verbalize into that message. We see the same sort of thing in technology now in terms of that assisted part. Is things like using something like Dragon. You can get everything that you want down quickly, easily. You can have the context in what you're, and it takes away that sort of, okay, I've got a large piece of, I've got an essay, I've got a dissertation, I've got an email. This is going to take me a while. I'm starting to build up those levels going, okay, well, is that spelt correctly? Have I got that right? And I'm adding processes and stuff in there. The same goes when we're talking about text in terms of having that text to speech side of, again, large documentation to read, things where, you know, using that tech there to read that back to somebody, again, taking away that sort of stress and strain or those and stuff. So again, people with dyslexia, speeding up the process by which they can gain that information and stuff in there by using it. And I think it's interesting that we use features of that. So if I turn this the other way around, we use features of assistive technology to a degree in what I've just said now, but we think that's just normal because that's just what we do. You then put that into another way. Oh, okay. So that's for dyslexic people, or that's for such and such. It's turning it around a slightly different way, but it is interesting that we do use a lot of this in a daily way anyway. But this is just adding it into, I guess, our day-to-day life, into a more extended version of those sort of ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And I will leave people a lot of voice notes. So just in case, Joe, I start watching you and Darius, it will be in voice note format.
No, don't. I've got enough visual and verbal processes in my world now that, yeah, I get lots of voice notes. And with our youngest, well, you know this, Matt, our youngest at Goldsmiths in London, and any communication is gratefully received. I have long since given up on requesting it in any format.
Yeah, and just, you know, taking that, a lot of what this is about, assistive technology, is about playing to your strengths rather than playing to your weaknesses. And so often you can say to someone, right, you should be sending me a text with all the spelling right and all the things correctly and punctuation and so on. And the person with dyslexia is like, oh gosh, that reply to Granny is going to take me 20 minutes, half an hour to write that reply text. And she thinks it's just going to take me 1 or 2 minutes. And a typical person, yes, it would be 1 or 2 minutes. So does Granny want a half-hour message that takes about 2 weeks to get round to do it? Or would she prefer a quick voice message saying, oh, thanks, Granny, that's great. Yeah, blah, 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 this is what's been happening. And then you send, you know, and you've not got any of that grammar or structure and so on because you're playing to your strength. And it's the same extrapolated in other ways. It's playing to that strength and saving up that kind of time to write it out really neatly and polished for when it's actually needed. And then you move into the next realm, which is actual speech to text and Grammarly and, you know, these tools that can actually clean up your grammar, and AI that can polish up your grammar rather than write it for you, etc. These tools are there to help you play to your strengths.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's exactly the point, is that it is allowing the user, like I say, to play to their strengths, to concentrate on what they need to concentrate on, to eliminate those sort of sides of, like, so part of the reason I said before is that I like to draw things as well, is that I'm not by any stretch of the imagination, my grammar and spelling leaves a little bit to be desired, and I'm quite happy to admit that. So again, partly for me, doing some of the stuff I prefer to do maybe on a call or something like that with people, is that I can actually take that element of me thinking about that away from the conversation. So I think that side of the technology is there to allow people to focus on what they're good at.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah, I
an
mean,
interesting way, Joe.
Well, I was going to say, it was interesting when we were just speaking with parents this week, high school age kids. But one of the questions that came up that you could see everybody really wanted to ask in the room was actually, how do you sort of preserve your child's confidence when the struggles are becoming more apparent? And I suppose one of the things that we'll say to people on quite a regular basis is everybody has the things that they're not so great at and the things that they're good at. And we feel an overwhelming temptation often to put an awful lot of time and effort into the things that we're not great at. But actually, we're only ever going to move ourselves up to average. And so why don't we spend all of that time and effort on the things that we're good at, moving them from good to great? Because actually, when we feel like we've accomplished something, when we feel like we're doing something that's in line with how we're wired, our confidence does inevitably grow when we do that. And so quite often, a lot of this technology is there. Okay, there's stuff you're not so great at. There's stuff that all of us aren't great at. Feeding my family in a busy week, right up there. So I use the online shopping and it's great. As if by magic someone appears with food at the door. But there's the technology's there to really shore up the stuff so that you can function in those areas, and then just spend the time doing the stuff that brings you joy and that you excel at in life. And I think that's kind of the gift of the technology. So often it's like you're saying, Matt, if you spent time in a meeting doing it how you thought everybody else want, but actually your unique contribution of what you can bring to that meeting would be lost because you'd be trying to do it in a way that didn't work with how you were wired. And I think that's the same for so many people. And actually now there's so much assistance out there. The stuff that's hard, find a solution for it and then crack on with the stuff that you're really great at.
Yeah. And I think it's one way of looking at these tools that they're more around the edges of the mainstream tools. Like I absolutely love scanning a book in and getting it read out to me. I use Voice Stream Reader for that. Other people use Speak, or what tool on the Superstore would do that? Sorry for my ignorance on that.
Let's say you've caught me with a good question there.
You don't have to say, but there's lots. Go. Yeah,
there's
okay.
lots. There's lots. Again, and that's not me deliberately sort of avoiding the question. That's just me said there are lots that will do that depending on your need and stuff. And I think you say about scanning and having it read back. I am a massive listener of podcasts.
Yes.
Because of exactly getting that information. I will find listening to a podcast fascinating about something rather than that's quite a lot of reading.
Yeah. Like just to give you an example, dear listener, when I see a book and I really like the look of the book, I go to Audible and I say, is it on Audible? And they're not all on Audible. So, oh, darn, I can't listen to this book. So I will literally spend 20 minutes hand scanning with my phone every single page on that book. Joe's seen me do it. Crazy. And when I'm doing it, I'm like, blooming heck, Darius, this is crazy. Scan, next page, scan, next page, scan, next page, scan. You can do it quite quickly, actually, but it still takes 20 minutes. But in my head, I'm going, right, if I was to read this book, it's going to take me literally 6 to 8 hours to read this book. Okay. I know after I've scanned it in for 20 minutes, I can listen to it in 2 hours at 2.5 to 3 times speed, because that's the speed that I think at and listen to books, 2x, 3x, sometimes even 3.5, 4x, if it's a decent enough book and it's not too dense. So, that is a strength of mine. I can listen faster than I can read, and I can comprehend it in the auditory sense more than I can when I'm reading it as text. Now, there is a place for reading as text, and often I read something as text and listen to it at the same time, and I'm highlighting that text and mind mapping it and so on if I really need to in-depth understand it and remember it. But the point there is I know my strength is listening, and I know it's effortless for me to listen in 2 hours rather than 6 to 8 hours. So I can do 3 times as many books, and actually I can do it while I'm driving, and I enjoy it so much more, or playing golf.
You play golf, Darius?
I do play golf occasionally now, Joe.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard you're quite into the golf, Darius. Only occasionally, though, from what I
Yeah.
understand. It's not not every day or week.
Yeah. But the point here is the podcast. Let's not. So the strength is listening to the audio. That's a strength. Okay. And then you've got text to speech. Okay. What is the strength that is being played off in text to speech? A lot of people are very good at talking through their ideas. And so they talk and they talk and they talk and they get it all down in words, and then they can go through and edit it afterwards. So that's a real strength, the talking. Then the mind mapping. What's the strength that's being exercised there? It's the visual strength. They might prefer seeing the big picture, a diagram, the order of things, the sequence of things, everything simultaneously, see the big picture rather than a list of instructions or a route, a driving list of instructions. What do you want? Would you prefer a list of driving instructions of what to do, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or would you prefer the map with a blue line through it? I prefer the map. So a lot of people are playing to their strengths with their visuals. So it's just really helpful with this assistive technology to think, what strength is this strengthening in my child or in me or in my employee? What is it maximizing?
Well,
Sorry,
I think what I was just going to say is your example there gives a great reason to go and do the research a little bit. So when I'm thinking about all those different softwares, and I'm thinking you do love to listen to a book, Darius, but another one of our daughters who's very dyslexic, still an avid reader, she probably wouldn't listen to a book, but then she would really have valued the speech to text because she's incredibly eloquent verbally, but when it comes to writing anything down, so she would tell you the most fascinating stories, and then she would summarize it in one sentence, which obviously is a little bit of a disaster when it comes to English assessments. So it's really that sort of own your challenges and find the solution, because it's not going to be the same for everybody, but be encouraged that there'll be something out there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, having taught hundreds of people how to use assistive technology with dyslexia over the last sort of 7 years, and just using that small example of speaking it into text, voice typing it, there's a big difference between, so you can get started on something like the iPhone or and you open the keyboard and there's the little microphone in the bottom right hand corner. I highly recommend it. You tap that, you start speaking, and it types out what you're saying. Now, up until about a year ago, it would interrupt you after 30 seconds and it would switch off, and you'd have to keep doing it and you'd have to keep doing it, and it would break your flow. And so a lot of these things are really useful for a small burst. But then some of these other tools where it's speech to text are the tools where there's small little things that make a massive difference. Like it won't switch off. It will just keep listening, transcribing anything. You can stay in the zone. You can keep talking. Some of them have punctuation. You can say next paragraph, new sentence, title, instructions, and so on. And that can make a huge difference to you as well. And so there's this sort of range you can explore of how much you want to exercise that. And I highly recommend not settling for, oh, well, we've got speech to text on our phone or on our computer, not because I want you to go and spend money, but because I want you to sort of experience the unlock of your gift, because there's nothing worse than someone starting to dictate their story like Megan might, and then they're in the middle of their flow, and then, ding, Siri cuts off while you're doing it on a, speech to text, oh gosh, oh, I need to make sure it's cut off and then I switch it back on. Oh, where was I? And you've got this worry that maybe it won't get it and so on. So there are nuances that make a big deal to someone who really needs it and relies on it, i.e. someone with dyslexia, than someone who's like, oh yeah, I like a little bit of speech to text now and then and just speak it when I'm feeling a bit tired or whatever. So I recommend just pushing it a little bit past where you think you really, really need it. Then you discover something great, like it'll read a whole book to you. And then you say, right, sometimes I use it for the book. Sometimes I use some other tool that is ubiquitous or embedded in it.
And I think you mentioned something there as well, Dareth, where we talk to people about the individuality of the product and the solution. And I think that's something which we are very keen on, is the fact that, we've spoken about text to speech, speech to text, etc. There is a product that we have on the Superstore called ivvi, which is a multi-word prediction software. Now, that's still relying on you as the user. So somebody who maybe doesn't want to use speech to text, they want to write because they want to have that ability to sort of continue to do that. But it is there as a support tool. It says it has AI inbuilt to it, but it's learning from the user. So it's completely sits on the machine. It doesn't go out to the internet. It's purely learning from you as a user and as an individual, that you write things in a particular way. And then actually I can predict what you're going to write and help you with that composition. I can help you with what you're writing because I'm learning from you and I'm creating this as an individual, but I'm using that technology maybe similar to how I would use speech to text, but in a different way, because that program suits me. But it might not suit the next person that comes into the shop, and it might not suit the person after that. But I think the one thing that we want to do is create options for people to go and make that decision and to say, okay, well, that's not right for me, but this one is. And I think it's the same thing that we see in education as well, is that if we can get this technology used, not by an individual, maybe by a whole class, by a whole school, that actually it forms part of that sort of daily use. It forms part of what the individual's doing, and that technology then can be the benefit of everybody. And again, going back to that original point I said about this year, what we talked to people about becoming individuals, is that using that terms of finding the right technology so that you are an individual. And that might not be the same as the person next to you or the person next to them, but it's right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I remember interviewing Jack Churchill from Scanning Pens, and I think that was maybe 4 years ago on the podcast. And one of the interesting things that stuck with me was they would like scanning pens. They've got a scanning pen that is available in the exam. So you can read it can read out certain keywords and so on to you. And they would like them to just be available to everyone, and scanning pens to just be in the little plastic bucket of pens and so on in the middle of a primary class, and every kid can pull it out to read out a certain bit of word and get the definition for it and things like that. And so it becomes just normalized. It's just another interesting piece of text. And oh, Darius uses a scanning pen a little bit more than everyone else. I wonder why that is. But he doesn't need to say, oh, it's because I'm dyslexic or whatever. It's just, I find I use it a little bit more. I find I do this a little bit more. But there's often other people who need the same technology when they're tired or stressed. You're like, oh, I'm exhausted. I can't read right now. So you use the scanning pen and reads it out. I'm just using that as a quick example. There's so many other texts.
Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, I know where there have been people using exactly those type of tools and stuff in terms of those reading pens, but not for dyslexia or not for their original intention, but in schools where they use them for English as a second language. But I also have situations where people have used them. I know one particular individual that uses it because they've had a stroke, and actually to be able to then have that because of eye issues and stuff reading at hospital, they could actually use the pen to do that. So again, not necessarily the original intention of the tool, but it is interesting where these technologies find themselves into sort of where people have gone, do you know what, that feature there, that's going to really make a difference to me. Not the other 99, but that one particular feature. And that's where we see the real benefit in the technology, I think.
Yeah.
What would you say, Matt? I mean, obviously, you've got an incredible amount of experience in the assistive technology world. So, through Aventido, where you're providing sort of innovative solutions into the DSA market, access to work, the workplace, SkillBridge with the apprentices, and AT Superstore, which is literally that shop at the bottom of the mountain to help everyone find what they need. What sort of trends or developments, what are you seeing shift in the technology market that is to the advantage of the folk who are listening to the podcast?
I think the biggest thing we're seeing is this shift into online. So the ability to access the technology in any location on any device. So as long as I've got an internet connection, whether that be a 5G or wireless, or I could do it on my phone, I could do it on my tablet, my laptop, computer in a library, like you guys to people in the library this week. That's the biggest shift that we're seeing, is the flexibility of the technology. Previously, it was something you had to have on your machine. But actually now I can go anywhere and I can log into my TechSed account. I can go and use my copy of ivvi. I can go and whatever it might be MindMeister for my mind mapping, but I can go and access that whenever I need to, where I need to.
Which I guess is reflective of a much more mobile society, but it's kind of encouraging to know that the tech's keeping up with that.
100%. And I mean, you mentioned the point, Joe, about doing your online food shopping, because we wouldn't want Darius to go hungry, so we've got to ensure that. But again, that's a change of the way that we do things. Technology is allowing us to do that, so we can do that on a device and stuff that we want to. And AT is no different, I think. And as we move towards more of that online applications and stuff, then they will also form part of what we do in our daily things. So with some of that text to speech or some of the website accessibility software, that actually I can do my online shopping as well now, because I can actually use that software to help me as well in terms of changing how I view something, for example. So I wouldn't say it's becoming mainstream, if that makes sense, but I think it is now the way that we are as individuals and the way that we interact with information means that technology is becoming more part of that.
There's a lot less friction involved in all of this. I think that's what you're really describing, is that in the past, assistive technology had a lot of friction. You had to download it onto a specific kind of device, it had to have a certain amount of power, had a certain size of screen, had to have certain this or that or operating system, etc. And often you had to buy a specific laptop to run some of these things, like Dragon and so forth. You'd have to have a powerful enough laptop to run it. Whereas now it's like, oh, you've already got a computer, you've got a Chromebook, you've got whatever. Yeah, there you go. And all you need is a email and a login, and there's a lot less friction.
Yeah, absolutely, and stuff. And I think that creates that environment of flexibility, I think, which we all want, we all need. And I think that's where we're being pushed down anyway, in terms of being able to do these things and having that technology as and when we want to. There's always the terminology used about having things on demand, which in theory is what we're saying here, is the fact that we can just log in with a username and a password.
Yes.
And then we've got everything and stuff that we need to be able to do what we want to.
Actually, that must create a lot of confidence. Sort of once you got familiar with the technology and once you find the sort of suite of products that really sort of supports you and enables you to feel confident in any scenario, you can go into any scenario because you can carry the tech with you. I mean, everyone's got a phone on them. So, you really are in a position where you don't have to be concerned. You're not going to kind of get caught on the hop going, oh man, if only I'd brought my desktop with me to the pub, or if only I'd fired up my old PC or whatever. You can literally just flip the phone open and then off you go, that's brilliant.
Well, the interesting, so I suppose advice to parents. Okay, so I've just got this question in my mind. I imagine there's parents going, "Oh yes, this is great, but what if my school doesn't do this, for example? You know, what if my school doesn't go and explore all of this, or have the budget, or have the time even to explore some of the low cost, no cost options that are actually out there?" And because it's not just money, it's the time involved in researching, finding out, testing, discovering what's worthwhile introducing. I think finding out what device your child actually has access to at university, at school, I mean, it could be a Chromebook, or it could be an iPad school, or it could just be some desktops. But if you can find those and then start using them yourself at home, at work, and then with your child doing homework and exercises and things like that, then they can often bring it into class and go, "Hey, miss, can I log on to, I don't know, ivvi Notes?" Or I know ivvi Notes because that's what we build, but whatever, because we've seen that with children, with parents going, "Oh, I've been mind mapping at home with mum on ivvi. Can I use it in class?" And the teacher goes, "Yeah, okay, you can go on the computer there and log in and show me what it is." And then that becomes their way of organizing a particular essay, or they can use it on their Chromebook if they've got it. So it's quite useful to know what device, because often children aren't allowed their phones. The phones are put to the side, but they are allowed to use this other device. And if you find some assistive technology, or even I highly recommend in Google, they've got an amazing tool in Google Docs, which is voice typing. And their voice typing under tools, you click voice type and they speak and it types it out, is actually pretty good. And so these kind of little insights become a sort of trickle of assistive technology starting to trickle into the classroom, and it raises this awareness of all these great tools out there.
And I think, asking that question, we see it at lots of different schools. Some using Chromebooks, some use laptops, some have desktops, some have Apple, some have iPads. There's a whole range of different things. And as you said, Darius, there's some great apps on the App Store. Brilliant. Have a look at those, get those down, get the children using those. It might be, as you say, it might be things within Google, might be things within the operating system. Have a look at all those and see how you can utilize them. What is the best option again? What is the best one in there? If it's an iPad, great. Let's have a look at these apps, because these work really well. Biggest thing we see as well is where the technology also within schools has the ability to be used at home as well. That's something else I think is quite important, where the vendors and manufacturers of that allow for take-home rights. So if you're a school looking at software and stuff, is it available? Do they have take-home rights? Can pupils, parents use it at home? Those are other sort of important questions as well around, if you're looking at that technology, how flexible is it in terms of inside and outside the school environment, in terms of its usage and stuff? So not only the platform, but can I use it in those other environments? We said before about newsletters. If a newsletter's gone home, perhaps I can use that text-to-speech product to actually have that read back at home, because that particular child's parents can't read that, or for whatever reason, there's things like that. So that's another thing that we also get people to think about as well.
Take home. One of the things you're really good at and experienced in is site licenses. And often, if you're not used to this as a teacher, you might be thinking, "I want all my children to have this, but oh, I've done the maths and I've looked on the website and it's £120 a year per child, and therefore it's going to cost for my school for it to be like £40,000 for this little software to be available to everyone." But actually, site licenses, once you do it for the whole site, for it to be available on demand, can often be very affordable in comparison to the individual list price, can't it?
Yeah, very much so. And the partners that we work with and around that with their software, this is something that we always discuss, is that we never want a school to be in a position of going, okay, well, we've got 10 people that need it. Actually, well, hang on a minute, or hang on. Well, yeah, maybe we could get away without that person needing it, and they start to take away licenses and stuff, because it becomes and affordable for them to need to do exactly what you just said. So we always want to work with organizations to say, look, make it available to everybody. Take away that question that the school or parent might be asking themselves. So it forms part of it. We've just recently started working with a company from Canada called Neuroline. And that was exactly the conversation. And in fact, it's a conversation that they actually led, in the fact that they wanted it to be available to every child in each class, and to take away the potential for a barrier based on cost per license. So that again is something that, is forefront of making the technology attainable to people by not pricing it out of the realms of what is affordable. And there are various sort of rules of thumb that we look at in terms of a price per pupil per year as a sort of a good way of doing it. And I don't know how much schools still have sort of PTAs and stuff, but going back to the days of my being ahead, that I've been to more duck races than I probably care to think about. But again, we're talking, if there's potentially, we've seen schools raise funds for that software.
And it can be surprisingly lower than you imagine. Like as the CEO of ivvi and Joe, the COO, when we're talking about what the site license is compared to the actual price per unit user on their own, it's a lot less. Like, and I'm wondering, if I was in the other shoes, there might be listeners around here thinking, how do I find out what the site license is for a school? Is there a list somewhere? How do they do that? If you wanted to have the whole school have access to a particular software, we know that not everyone's going to use it. Only a percentage is going to use that because that's their thing. And then another percentage is going to use another thing more. And it's representative of our different strengths and challenges. How do they find out?
I mean, a lot of suppliers and software vendors will have that pricing. On Superstore, we've include that within the options. So if there's a school license or a site-wide license and stuff, there's availability for that. And I think it's also down to those people to ask as well, saying, look, do you have a price for a site license, a school license, etc., so that we can make it available to everybody at a cost-effective way to maximize that sort of budget that we've got. And I think it is that side of it, to be able to understand that there will be a core that you are probably looking at that product for, but there will also be second part of that who will benefit. And as we said before, that with a lot of the technology, it might just be one particular feature. So there might be a dozen people within the school or the site stuff that use a particular feature, but they probably weren't necessarily on your original thought process for actually having that piece of software.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel that we could, the thing is, so much, Matt, and we obviously know you as well. So we could keep talking forever. Probably on my part, in the hope of seeing a kitten. But,
True.
but if you were to sort of leave one message of encouragement for parents, students, people in the workplace, and they've listened to the podcast and they've thought, oh gosh, I've got this challenge, there could be a solution out there. What would you encourage them? What's their next step? What would you say to them?
What I would say is reach out to people. Reach out to, whether it's the likes of myself, the team at AT Superstore, people like yourself, Joe and Darius, who've got an incredible amount of know-how, incredible amount of information, and obviously not just saying this because obviously knowing you guys and stuff as well, but who are happy to impart that information to others and stuff. And I think that's the important bit to reach and to have that conversation and stuff like that, and to be able to. One of the things that we try and do, and there's a great team at AT Superstore and Aventino and Skillbridge and is to ask the question. And in all honesty, if we don't know, there is probably somebody that we work with that does know. That's something that we are always striving for, is that we're learning every day. And if we can pass that on to whether that be parents, whether it's teachers, individuals, people in the workplace, then that's that's probably pretty much our job, if that makes sense. The secondary bit is then the technology. But if you're asking those questions, then we're going to direct you to where that information is going to make a difference. And I think it's one of the things that we always do, especially around OT Superstores, when we get that email back from the school or a parent to say that piece, we tried that. And we've had this before where we've sent out items and trial software to parents saying, look, try these. This is what's available. Try it, see how your child gets on with it. And you tell us which one worked, because that one might not work, but this one might work, and then feed that back. And that's really what we want to do, is ask those questions of us and let us direct you in the best way that we can. And if we can't, we will certainly be calling on the likes of people like yourself and Darius and others out there to give us that information.
Yeah, and I think that's brilliant. That's such an encouragement that people are in this field because we want to make a difference. We want to see people succeed. We want to see people thrive. So if you're listening to this and you're wondering what your next steps are, reach out. AT Superstore's details will be in the show notes. Obviously, you know how to get in touch with us at ivvi. And yeah, we're kind of all part of this big ecosystem that just want to see people win. So we'll definitely be here to help.
Yeah, get to the top of your particular mountain.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
with as few blisters as possible.
Yeah, no blisters. Blisters
Okay.
are not necessary. Absolutely not necessary. The right kit, you just get something that fits your brain, fits your way of working, and you get there.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Brilliant.
cat time. Show us the kitten.
Bear with me. I will see if we can get one of them to come and make a guest appearance.
Well, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. It doesn't really. I don't mind.
Darius, it's
Joe
only
is
for
the cat
now.
person. I'm not the
It's-
cat person.
Darius has been saying all day, I hope we get to see a kitten.
Right, yeah, lovely. Great. Okay. Bye.
There is Garfield making an appearance.
Oh,
I do
No.
like Garfield, actually. Garfield cartoon. Loved it as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. He's part of the second gang of rescue kittens. So there we are.
oh wow, he's definitely looking a bit chunkier these days.
Yeah. Well
Yeah,
fed.
yeah. I think they're doing their own online shopping. That's what it is, Joe. That's part of it. They're getting their own food in.
Their own online assistive technology. Cat meows to text. Meow, meow, meow.
Yeah,
Turns it into text and actions on the browser.
That could be a
Exactly.
whole new avenue for AT, like feline assistive technology.
gonna say, yeah. Well, I think they would certainly help me in getting somebody to put that together. Maybe that's something, Joe, we'll have to ask Darius to sort for us.
We could get train an AI neural net on what the cats are saying, and then the owners will be told whether it's food, drink, cuddles, toilets, all that sort of thing. You could make
Yeah.
a bomb there. That's you sorted, Matt. That's your
I was gonna
next
say,
animal AAT.
there we go. We'll put that on the next podcast. There we are. There's another spin-off coming. I can see this already.
Right, we should probably say goodbye at this point.
Right, before it becomes too ridiculous. Nice to have you, Matt. See you later.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
thank
Pleasure
you.
to these guys. Thank you ever so much.
Bye.